Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to thank Tom Dempsey for putting together a wonderful program and congratulate you all for being part of the 2014 class of our Next Generation of African Security Leaders program. The reason I need to stand is because I've been on a plane for 19 hours, and sitting for 19 hours, you need a bit of a break. But I am really pleased to be having a conversation with you today about what ethical leadership means for you as the next generation of African security leaders. Here we have some people who are in uniform, various shades of uniform on the security side. Others are in uniform on the law enforcement side. We have civilians of various grades from various institutions. But I believe if you listen closely to what Dr. Thomas just shared, there's a commonality that runs through all of them. And that's the imperative, the need for ethical leadership, particularly now. If you look at Africa now, you're seeing a lot more economic growth. You're seeing many more elections. You're seeing more connectivity. You're seeing civil society become increasingly involved. What's missing? Most people will say it's part of the governance equation. What's beneath all of that? It's ethics. We talk a lot about ethics in politics, ethics in natural resource management, ethics in economic determinism. But very rarely do we have a considered discussion about ethics in the security sector. What I want to do is not go over the ground Dr. Thomas has so ably presented. And if you haven't done so yet, I really recommend his paper, which is in your syllabus. It's not too long. Take some time and read it, because I think it encapsulates not just the theoretical side of ethical leadership, but how you can take that as a tool as you think about your area of responsibility and how that could become more, and how those principles could become more impactful. I'm not going to speak for very long, but I've divided my remarks into 3 sections. And since, unlike the great Dr. Thomas, I don't have a PowerPoint, I want to have a few markers that we could use so you know where I'm going and when I get where I hopefully want to get in the end. The website address for the Africa Center, I'd like you to write this down. It is www.africacenter.org. And I'd like to apologize to my Portuguese and French-speaking friends, because the words are not going to match exactly, but you'll get my point. I'll talk about WWW, the what, why, and who, about ethical leadership first. Then I'll talk about Africa Center. That's the second part. What the Africa Center does that could be beneficial to you as you consider how to apply the principles of ethical leadership. And then the ORG at the end, for me, is the most important part, is how we could reconceptualize domestic and external organization to get us there. Let me start with the first W, the what. When most people think about ethical leadership in Africa and in Africa's security sector, the first thing you think about is corruption. Ethical leadership is not just about corruption. In my view, ethical leadership, if you want to put it in the simplest of terms, it's the values that underpin your behavior. That's ethics. What values underpin your behavior? I have been following African developments very, very closely since the 60s and beyond. But it is curious how in every decade there's something new that becomes the guiding paradigm for Africa. In the 60s, we had the Green Revolution. 70s, we had the industrial substitution. In the 80s, it was structural adjustment. In the 90s, it was privatization. 2000s, we saw this emergence of the new economic reality on the continent, and it will go on and on and on. But what we need to find out is not what the fad of the day or the fad of the decade is. It is which values underpin ethical leadership in Africa. There are African values, and in each of our countries, we have various ethnic groups, various political coloring. But regardless of what those values might look like or sound like when you verbalize them, there are two important things. Serve for the security sector. The first is service. The second is integrity. When you combine these two, then you start understanding what ethical leadership is about. It's about service. It's about integrity. Many times we think that Western countries, Eastern countries always tell Africa what to do. Our politicians always swaying from the West to the East to the BRICS to... But the important thing is, if you understand the basics of service and integrity, and Dr. Thomas's paper laid this out very well, then you understand that it's not inconsistent with a lot of the international norms. What we need to know is where we are in the development of ethical leadership in our various countries and know exactly how to apply the concepts. Well, before I move to the next W, we're generally challenged in Africa because a lot of what the textbooks tell us about ethical leadership is about security as it applies to territorial integrity. Not security as it applies to non-state actors or internal civil disturbances or pandemics. The textbooks haven't got there yet. So we need to take the service and integrity components of ethical leadership and apply them to the contemporary climate that we know best. Second W is why. Most times when you hear a new slogan, ethical leadership, it always sounds like this is something that the outside world wants Africa to do. But no, with ethical leadership, it's important for three reasons. One, because unethical leadership undermines security. Corruption in Africa's security sector, military, law enforcement, it makes the countries less secure because the military forces are less prepared. They don't get the right training, don't get the right education because of unethical leadership. Secondly, it complicates security. We all read or have been reading over the last 3 to 5 years about human rights abuses by police, by military. Most recently, even the peacekeepers are committing human rights abuses on the continent. That's why we need ethical leadership. Because once the security establishment starts committing human rights violations, they lose the trust and they complicate the security environment. Thirdly, unethical leadership reverses security gains. Looking across the continent, comparing Africa today with 20, 30 years ago, there are fewer wars. Some of the wars we thought would never end, ended. Countries are making a lot of progress economically, socially, and politically. All those could be reversed if we have unethical leadership being the order of the day. the third W. We did, the first W was what? Then we talked about why. And now who? Another general refrain when we talk about ethical leadership in Africa is, oh, we all exist in a corrupt environment. If the bosses above us could only be honest, we would also be honest. That is not true. 100%. We all have a role to play in ethical leadership. So for the W, ethical leadership in Africa is not just about the bosses or the senior politicians. It's about us all, particularly in the security sector. I'm an American serviceman general, Chuck Krulak, and I think it's also in your syllabus. Is it? No. I see Tom. Okay. There's a very short article written by Chuck Krulak, and he talks about and it's on GlobalNet as well. I challenge you to read it, because he wrote this article in 1999. He talks about a concept called the three-block war. And he was looking ahead and saying the soldier or the security professional of the 21st century needs to be conditioned, because you're not only going to be having territorial type of conflicts where you fight wars, you're also going to have to be building peace through development and humanitarian assistance. You're also going to have to be keeping peace as peacekeepers. So it's a different mind construct. But what is important about this, and a subsequent article to this had introduced another concept called the strategic corporal. And the underlying ethos is that you, the policeman at the checkpoint, are the face of the security. The citizens don't have to wait until they meet the generals. Once they have met you, you represent. So ethical leadership is also every individual's responsibility. So that's the 3 W's. Now I have to rush with the Africa Center. What does the Africa Center do? We provide educational engagement opportunities like this, not just to talk about the concepts, but to be honest with each other about what we can do individually and collectively to ensure that ethical leadership principles are translated into more effective and lasting security outcomes across the continent. We also help to establish benchmarks in our discussions. How would we know we're making progress? How would we know that leadership is becoming more ethical? The second thing that we do in this context is we provide opportunities for institutional strengthening by improving security sector transformation efforts, by supporting institutions, security sector-related institutions in your country, so that things like training, education would have, to use Dr. Thomas's words, ethical leadership infused in the curriculum. So it's not something that is an add-on, something you learn later on. It is part of your training and your recurrent training. Third thing for the Africa Center is that we do provide the opportunity to develop communities of interests, networks of professionals like yourself. You're here for 3 weeks, and when you go back to your countries, you're going to have to confront a lot of the issues that would question your value system, that would question your integrity as a security sector professional. You want to know how your brothers and sisters that you met in Washington, D.C., how they're handling it, or how other regions are handling it. And so through our alumni networks and the GlobalNet as an educational platform, we do provide opportunities for an exchange of ideas that would help reinforce this educational experience that you're going to have over the next 3 weeks. And our hope is that it would help build a strong cadre of collectively reinforcing and supportive professionals across the spectrum. So we've done www.africacenter.org. Both domestically and externally, we're not really well organized to ensure that we start building a cadre of ethical leaders. We need to be able to work a lot more with the institutions, not just that train, but also the institutions that exercise governance. I understand that we have a parliamentarian with us. And this is one of the challenges, because as democracies grow, all the branches of government need to grow at a similar pace. Because if you don't have people who can exercise credible oversight, it becomes problematic. That's how impunity becomes the order of the day, and it becomes very difficult to focus the attention on the task at hand. Lastly, I pose a question. But if I pose a question, let's just go over very quickly. What, who, what, why, and who? Very important. What the Africa Center do? And we do need a lot of organization domestically and also externally. Africa has a lot of friends. And we just accept gifts from all of our friends without thinking strategically, but how does this prepare us to become better professionals? And the gifts from our friends they're not interoperable. The gifts from our friends, we don't have any thought about how to sustain them over time. The gifts from our friends may even clash with our value systems. So we need organizational coordination there as well. I'd like to end with four answers to a question which I'll pose. Is what should the next generation of African security leaders be doing today to provide them for ethical leadership tomorrow? My first point is start being prepared for leadership. Some of you are already in senior leadership positions, but very soon you will be taking control of the institutions in which you work. We might today have a climate that's a lot more different from what it will be in 5, 10 years. But if you don't start being prepared today, in 10 years we'll have the same problem when your subordinates will be complaining about unethical leadership above them. So first I'll say, be prepared, equip yourself with training, equip yourself with education, and equip yourself with the tools that you would need. Secondly, be courageous. It is not easy. It is really, really, really challenging. And the temptations are great, not just for corruption, but also to find the easy way out or shortcuts. You have to be courageous because the next generation behind you is depending on you to blaze the trail. Third, be creative. As I said before, most of the paradigms and the theories we talk about and read in the books, they relate a lot more to the Westphalian paradigm of state building, not today's challenges where most of the threats are internal and domestic. And fourth, I challenge you to be connected. One of the blessings of the 21st century is the ease and the speed with which we could be connected. Let's use that as a tool to learn from each other, to share with each other, and to support each other. And if we're able to do some of these things, I believe that we would at least lay the groundwork and the foundation for more ethical security sector establishments across Africa. Thank you.